Indeed, most of our members for the past few months have had to rethink and reorganize their budgets to make sure that they can have resources allocated to COVID-19 initiatives just to help and support the government. We have had different contributions. Some have contributed hand sanitizers, PPEs, and so many other contributions. Right now, I would like to invite Kenneth, our moderator of the evening, to take over. Kenneth is an executive and head of global markets at Stanbic Bank. Kenneth, please take on.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you to AmCham, thank you to Grant Thornton for putting this session together today. Many thanks to the companies here represented. I guess Mike said it well when he said that COVID is here, but in Uganda for the last 2 weeks or so since they lifted the lockdown, it looks like COVID has left, apart from the traffic jams that have since increased quite significantly. But yeah, the impact of COVID we feel will be felt for a long time still. And as we get into this conversation, please do allow me, ladies and gentlemen, to welcome our 3 panelists for the day. In no particular order, please do welcome Ms. Keto Nyapendi Kayemba. Keto has vast experience. I was looking at her bio here, and I haven't seen someone with so many degrees in a while. I can see you raising your eyebrows. But Keto works as an assistant Assistant Auditor General in the Auditor General's Office of Uganda. Specifically heads audit department, audit division within the Auditor General's office. Her office carries out statutory, financial, performance, information technology, and forensic audits for a number of public enterprises. She has vast experience in a number of public enterprise areas. Keto also is a fellow of the Association of Chartered Certified Accountants. I believe I have that right. She holds an MSc in Energy Management and an MBA in Makerere, 2 master's degrees. Wow. Welcome, Keto. Then we have Mr. Sam Mogeza. Sam is a Chief Financial Officer. Sorry, I promoted you there for a short while, Sam. Chief Financial Officer of Stanbic Bank Uganda. He is also a certified accountant, a passionate coach, and a certified professional coach for that matter. Sam also holds an MBA. He has worked in various institutions across Africa and beyond, including Citibank, Barclays, Stanbic in Uganda, Tanzania, and DRC, and carries vast experience in the financial industry sector. Welcome, Sam.
Thank you, Kenneth.
Yes, and last but not least, we have Ms. Emal Shah. Emal Shah is currently the manager of advisory at Grant Thornton, Uganda. She is a rank holder and a chartered accountant from the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India and possesses a master's degree in computer applications. Wow. Accounts and computer applications. She has worked with PwC and Reliance Group of companies in India. Welcome, Emal.
Thank you so much, Kenneth.
Yes, for the purposes of conversation, I will ask Sam, thank you very much for that. And I'd just like us to get straight into this conversation and discussion. A lot has been said about COVID and the impact of COVID-19, and that's making many companies rethink their strategies around effectively budgeting to go through this crisis and come out the other side are still strong. There is a recent survey, a business impact survey that was done by Makerere University, the Ministry of Finance, together with UNCDF, that said that only 15% of 1,000 companies that were involved in that survey actually say that they have enough cash flows to last longer than 3 months. It's also said that 91% of those firms say that their revenues for this year are going to be forecast to come lower than what they made last year. Lastly, that almost over 2/3 of those firms are saying that they have to cut back their workforce by at least 30%. All these things talk to cost and to significant impact. Ms. Keto, if I could start with you, given your lanes from a government and public sector perspective, how could you advise companies or institutions can put in place, what measures can companies or institutions put in place to assess potential risks such as COVID that were unforeseen and be able to define responses towards this? Kate, I think you're on mute.
Thank you, Kenneth. Thank you for that question. COVID is something that has come to stay. What Mike says has actually, I think it's happening all around. Everybody's wondering what's happening because people are getting back to normal. And yet we say there's a new normal. There's a new normal and then you're going back to the old normal. And masks are being thrown and all that. What we have done in government, in Office of the Auditor General, and probably I would think in companies around, is really to go back to the drawing board, because you realize that everybody is in shock as to what has happened. It has never happened before. We never ever thought that we would reach a situation where everybody is just at home, and therefore there has been a cash trap. There has been a stop, I call it a stop dead situation where everybody had to put everything down and just wait. For 2 months, we had to sit and do nothing. So the issue is to go back to your budgets and look at them and relook at them and assess you as an institution, as an entity, what's your relevance? What is your value proposition? What is it? Are you still relevant in the new era? Do you still have, I mean, we had the situation of essential services. Do you consider yourself to be somewhere along there? Do you give essential services to the people? Or are you that kind of company that will eventually find itself out of the way, outcompeted, not in position? We need to look at COVID in the short term, the medium term, and the long term. It is not something that is going to go away immediately. It is something where we have in the short term to think about the sanitizers and the restricted access and a lot of communication to staff. But in the long term, we have to look at what opportunities have arisen, what is there for you. So basically for me, the issue is to go back and do a proper reassessment of yourself, a proper market analysis, given what you are providing out there. I believe that certain businesses like airlines, like the hospitality industry, have been greatly devastated. One has to look at your situation. Has COVID brought in situations? Because there are companies that haven't been that much affected by COVID, but some have been greatly affected by COVID. Are you one of those whose supply chains have been greatly affected? Do you have a lot of imports that you had that now you have to rethink around how you even produce? What is it that you are doing? Look at information management, because it is key. It is a major. Let's look at any entity that is to survive this COVID has to look at how it is managing information around itself. Anything around you, you have to be able to have your people understand how to react in social media, how to react. Should you have a problem? Should you have a case? So I think for me, the issue of planning is about going back and refocusing and relooking at your whole situation and how it has affected what you have. In the office, we have formed a crisis management team, COVID response crisis management team. And this is just a team of thinkers to just tell us what they see. The situation is uncertain. very disruptive, ever evolving. So the team looks and informs us such that we can take action and we can look at things that can help us in mainly reducing expenditures and probably maximizing our revenues therein. I think that's what I can say for now.
Thank you very much, Kate. You raised some interesting points there. You do talk about the short, medium, long-term planning and the importance of looking at the COVID crisis in that lens, whereby we look at the short-term and then the medium-term impact, and then in the long-term, what potential opportunities this really brings up. And then you talk about the COVID response team, and that brings up something around continuity of business. Sam, I would like to come to you on this same specific question. So looking at your lens, being a CFO of a significantly large company in Uganda, how have you handled, how would you advise companies to handle this particular point around putting measures in place to assess potential risks on budget?
Thank you. Thanks, Kenneth. I think it's a very topical issue now, and mostly because the level of disruption we've seen now, we haven't seen, in a lifetime, or even more. Or given the global impact of how the issue has spread quite quickly, but also has forced the rapid disruption of business models that people thought they had time to basically manage. I like something Kato said that I want to just start on is, for a long time, we focused on planning and 5-year plans and budgets as though they were static. And we made plans static and structures static. And we never really thought about purpose and value. And one of the things that becomes very elevated in this context is one has to think about the value question and the purpose question, and understand that that is the guiding light. And plans and structures are meant to be agile. And any action that creates a permanence around plans creates an inflexibility and a lack of agility, which is the primary challenge that will impact organizations, people, etc. So there's a couple of things I want to just say on the point that or the question you just asked. One, you have to take stock. You have to take stock and realize that you have to understand your current state. What is the current state of your business? What is the current shape of your business? The implication of COVID. And you have to look across your whole value chain. So you look at where do your inflows come in? What is the logistics that enable those inflows? How do we create value from these inflows? What is our distribution for these inflows? How do we get it to the end client? And how do we serve the client and ensure that they're able to have good visibility of what we have? That current state and the disruption to that current state is very important, because it tells you where the current disruptions are along your value chain that you need to be very sensitive about as you plan. The second thing I think is very important, which we're doing a lot in the organization, is you have to build the discipline of scenario planning. And scenario planning, not with the view of limited functional structured approach to scenario planning, but to start to build, now that you understand the linkages in your business, to begin to build scenarios around what events could happen and what are the levers in your business that if they moved a certain way would create a significant impact. And what we typically do in the organization is that we build what we call a best view. We look at the business is most exposed to, we run scenarios around how these levers move and adjust based off the information that is emerging. We build that view that says, on a best case view, that if we see some real strong tailwinds on certain areas and we're able to navigate certain complexities, we're able to perhaps get a more positive outcome. And then the last view is a bear view, which is one that says, okay, when things are... And the importance of all these views, the bear view is really what shows you the level of stress that your business can handle, and stress would result on your financial performance, your commitments, etc. The bullish view is also to keep optimistic about the opportunity in the market, because sometimes we get so obsessed with the negative aspects. And the bullish view helps to open your eyes to where you're. The third one is once you've done that, you have sense for you and a plan around that scenario. And in that, define some initiatives that you are going to intentionally do. And for me here, the power of focus is important because getting a laundry list of 100 things to do is not likely to be very effective. It's important to build a discipline of focus and defining those fewest things that if you focus on will create the highest leverage for your business. And in line with that, what one should then do is instead of focusing on simply revenue performance and cost control and those typical lag financial metrics we always like to look at, you must establish those critical key performance indicators, and I'll call them lead key performance indicators, that tell you about the evolving health of your business and tell you about the temperature changes in your business before the revenue comes and all these things. And it could be something as simple as the number of leads generated by your business, the number of client calls you are able to receive on a given day, whatever it is for your business that most impacts a financial outcome for your business is very important to look at. And then the last one that I will speak to now is you then have to establish a new way of working. And I like the point made earlier. This is a completely different landscape. And if one approaches this landscape with an old mindset of how you plan and how you build these nice detailed planning documents that are built off the premise of control, what you find is that you do two things. One, you restrict the flexibility of the business to think as opportunities are created, but also you begin to create for yourself a static mindset, which is perhaps the most critical negative factor at this market with clients. And it's important to begin to build more fluid, new ways of work, new ways of planning, a lot of scenario planning, as I've mentioned. Think about things in your business that you can automate, how you can de-risk your business from logistical chains that are very likely to be disrupted in the manner that we've seen. And that begins to shape a thinking around how you can plan differently going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you very much for that. I'm hearing a few points there. You spoke about agile planning, bringing the point home around short, long-term, and medium planning, making sure that your plan is agile. That's quite relevant for this particular point in time. You speak about the fact that you need to assess where your business is right now and how you can then develop various scenarios from a best case or worst case scenario and make sure that you sort of plan for everything. Some may argue that COVID was even below the worst case scenario in terms of the impact on businesses. So we're in a completely new era in this particular respect. However, I think on that point, I come to you, Hema, and with Grant Thornton doing a lot of work around resilience advisory services, you're strong in that area, and this idea of planning. If you could just bring this conversation together and ask, in your own opinion and based off the work that you do on the advisory side, what do you think makes a good business continuity plan if you advise companies out there? And what are those 2 or 3 things that they need to take care of when they're busy assessing a great business continuity plan?
Thank you so much, Kenneth. Like rightly said by Ms. Kato and Sam, we think that a disaster can strike an organization at any point in time. It can be in the form of maybe a site breakdown or a business partner issue, or in terms of human capital, or in terms of a hurricane or a pandemic. But it is very critical for organizations to plan and to plan in a way that it can ensure that the operations are back to normal as quickly as possible. So for this purpose, what we recommend is that every business should have a business continuity plan, which is basically covering several aspects of how a business can continue in this tough situations. Of course, there is a standard by ISO, International Organization for Standardization. There is ISO 22301, which also explains in quite detail how organizations can develop their continuity management systems. If I am to very briefly talk about what should be key considerations while developing such a business continuity plan, we believe that the businesses should understand what the impact is going to be on each of their functions, divisions, or processes. And then they should identify gaps in every area which would prevent their operations. And then, like Ms. Kato said, that they've already developed a crisis management team. It is very important to have a leadership team, a defined team, which can handle such a situation and take over and then guide the organization through it. And then, like Mr. Sam has said, that scenario planning is very important. Even what we follow at Grant Thornton and what is also defined in ISO is a PDCA model, which is plan, do, check, act model, through which you can continuously plan, establish, operate, monitor, review, and then continuously improve the effectiveness of the continuity plan. So you need to continue the simulation, considering all the aspects of recovery and testing, and then operate it, monitor it, and then again make the improvements to the plan and continue on the model until a sustainable position is being able to come back. And this business continuity plan is very important because it gives a reassurance to employees, customers, suppliers, investors, regulators, and other stakeholders that the organization has sound systems and processes in place for continuity. It helps reduce cost and less impact on the business performance, and it gives better understanding of business through thorough analysis of critical issues and areas of vulnerability. So with that, I think we would strongly recommend that every business should make a business continuity plan, and all the points that have been said so far on the subject are very key points to help companies put in place their responses for global crisis.
Thank you very much, Emma, for that. You touched on a point there where a good plan reduces costs. A good plan helps to reassure clients, reassure regulators, reassure all different sectors of all different stakeholders. Let me just circle this back to Sam as a direct question, given that you are in a company right now. So the idea of make a plan, reduce costs. There's also the idea right now of the fact that revenues are definitely going to drop. Like I mentioned at the beginning, 90% of the companies that have been surveyed are saying that they're likely not to make as much this year as they did last year. You still have to return a benefit to the shareholder. What are those, in your opinion, top overheads, costs that you would advise companies to potentially look at and eliminate at this particular point in time?
Okay. So it's a good question, because one of the when revenues are under pressure, you must look at your cost line and see what are those costs that don't have either a strong linkage into revenue or can be executed more efficiently. And there's a couple of things, and I'll just give a little example here. I went to visit a client, not even a client, it's a partner entity that I won't name really. But I went to their office and they were completely, there's no one in the office. But, and he has all these great spaces put there. He has all these tables and all these chairs and nice desks he had created there. But there's no one there. But what he confirmed is that all his developers, which a platform-based company, were all actively working where they were. So it was very clear that real estate is not as important as we thought it was for fulfillment of work. And one of the ways, because property, rental space is quite pricey, and the ability to shed off some of that rental space is going to be a key factor for entities who will leverage working from home, which is now a discipline that is forming quite quickly. And it's going to be really based off a lot of trust and not as much control as, you know, sitting in the same space we typically have. So that's going to be one really large opportunity. The other one, which is quite sensitive, but I must say, is how entities think about their resourcing plans. And it's a sensitive one at this point in time. But the point I'll make here is that as much as possible, leverage of contractors and outsourced capability, and do not look to onboard resources as quickly as one would have done in the past. It's very important to build the right discipline around what core capabilities you want to build internally and which capabilities you can execute from outside the organization, so that you do not unnecessarily house costs that will be difficult for you to shed off in a difficult scenario. The third one I'll speak to is, you know, most organizations have fixed contracts for different activities. You'll have fixed marketing spend, you'll have fixed, you know, maintenance spend, and all these fixed spends. One of the ones that's very interesting for me looking at is marketing, and how digital and the ability to leverage digital de-emphasizes need for, you know, fixed space on billboards and fixed space on the traditional media channels. And I can see a very clear shift coming much quicker than perhaps was anticipated, where a lot of these traditional channels of distribution, traditional channels of marketing are going to be disrupted, and there's going to be a lot more space for digital execution to displace those fixed costs, and a lot more of a shift from fixed contracts to transactional contracts, where people pay per use. So even something as simple as Zoom, if you're paying for a 1-year contract, people may start to be more choiceful about transactional purchase of product as opposed to fixed contract payment. And that would be my comment.
Thanks a lot, Sam. That's quite useful. You speak about real estate, how many empty buildings are out there. Remembering that the people in real estate are also facing COVID issues, and you're about to take away their revenue earners. So if I was in a real estate business, I would ask them, what do you want me to do, and how do I survive COVID? Ms. Keto, let's bring this back to you. Within government, you know, among the audits you do, you also do performance audits, and at the end of this financial year, you'll be auditing a few government agencies on how they are performing. They have very many of these sunk costs that some spoke about, and so I would like to just bring this to you and just ask. What are the key considerations that they should keep in mind when revising their budgets? You know, where there's this whole talk this whole week of state agencies being asked to revise budgets, take some money away from current 5 trillion shillings we hear. So what would be your advice to these entities on the key considerations in changing their cash flow budget?
Thank you, Kenneth. Government is quite different, and I think probably we are a bit slower than the private companies, because the private companies are hit head on. So that slowness in itself is something that we are going to look at as to how people responded quickly to ensure that they reduce any wastage of money that in services and things that they don't need to. I think government really does not have what you call overheads, and it's difficult to completely look at that the way the private sector does. But I will mention items which government definitely, as we do the audits that we're going to do this time around, we're already doing the planning. What are you doing on seminars? What are you doing around training? What are you doing around rent, as Sam has said? What are you doing around those things to ensure that we are restricting the outflows of cash, given that government is already under pressure? We know that for the last quarter, I don't think there's been any substantial collection of revenue. And at the same time, there hasn't been a lot of work by government workers. So all the money that was budgeted for and already released for the fourth quarter, that is a very good question for us to ask government in the next session that we are going for. We would like also to understand how they have readjusted their budgets accordingly to ensure that anything that, all the frills, they have pushed them out, because we are looking for money to fund the National Task Force. So we do not have money for any overheads. We do not have money, not for any overheads. We need to at least reduce the money as much as possible. But I think also, I will add on, especially for private companies, we would look towards, as I was thinking around the discussions we're going to have, I'm like, do these companies bother to find out how much they could gain from the stimulus that government is giving? Because government is giving all the stimulus to private companies, all the tax deferrals, all the NSSF deferral. I think there's an NSSF deferral. There are penalty deferrals, all lifting, waivers. There are payments of domestic carriers that are going to be done. These are all things that can help private companies manage their cash positions slightly better. There are interest costs, and government has given, I think the monetary policy, some would know this better, the policies have come around looking at the financing costs and trying to extend them. According to me, the delay, you may not stop a payment, but that delay in itself helps you manage yourself within this cash-strained position.
Thank you very much, Kato. Just to remind the participants that you can always post your questions in the chat. If you do have any questions, please do post them there. Thank you very much, Joanita, for your question. I will get to you in a short while. But just moving on what you've just mentioned, Kato, and I would bring in Hemal here. In your view and your opinion, Hemal, just to supplement on what Kato said, how would you advise companies as to approach the issue of cash flow planning? What are the key factors and considerations that they need to put in place when determining how to effectively spend their budget?
Okay, thank you, Kenneth, for that question. Cash flow, as we understand, basically is a relationship between the money coming in and going out of the country. And especially during this time of pandemic, what we can see is that the income or the revenue streams are reducing, and the expenses hence seem to be going up to the roof. So it becomes very important for companies to manage their cash flows and identify which expenses are costing too much money, and how they can manage the liquidity and allocation of their assets. So cash flow planning, according to me, could be in two ways. You should have a short-term cash flow planning, and then you should have a long-term cash flow planning. So basically, the short-term cash flow planning would be looking at the daily or weekly cash flows, the aspects of the money coming in and going out in a short span of time, and make very granular forecasts, which can help have more insight into future planning. So it needs to have that analysis done, and then account for the actual versus what was anticipated, and then make informed adjustments to the forecast of the next week in line with the deviations and the actual trends. So that's basically with the short-term cash flow planning, and as long as the long-term planning is to be considered, a lot of points like what Ms. Cato had said initially, that a strategic or a new out-of-the-box approach had to be think about. You should consider operational changes. You should consider diversification of strategies. You should consider value chain analysis, people management, working capital cycles, capital expansion, and restructuring options, and all those aspects into consideration while making the long-term cash flow. And then what is most important is the scenario analysis to be done, considering that if this scenario is coming to or deviating by so many percentages, what could be the impact on the cash flow? So although it is a bit technical in terms of making the model and forecasting, and then moving around with, various scenarios and considering different aspects. At the same time, it is very critical, because like Mr. Sam had said, that it is the one which will help understand what are the key performance drivers or the costs which are taking up too much of the money, or which need more attention on, and then you can focus, or you can decide that these are the costs which are completely unavoidable, and this is the area where we can probably bring in some improvements. You can probably create strategies on how best to project and manage your cash flows. So I would say that in order to maintain the overall liquidity in the tough time, it is critical that the short term and the long term cash flows are taken into consideration, and there's a scenario analysis that is done on them.
Thank you very much, Amal. I'm sure even with those complexities, that's why we have Grant Thornton, because you can ably help and assist in advising companies and breaking down those complexities. There's a question that I would like to pose to you, Sam, from Joanita, and it's on business continuity plans. Joanita says that in view of the level of uncertainty regarding this pandemic, with talks of a potential second wave and a protracted period before the situation will be brought under control, how flexible should a business continuity plan be? That's one part of the question. The second one is, what are the possible scenarios that one can take into account when preparing a business continuity plan in the heat of this crisis? What are those few points that you can advise Joanita?
All right, thank you, Joanita. It's a great question, because there's a lot of uncertainty around the crisis, how long it will take, when it will ease off, what situation that might look like, and the economic impact. In fact, there was a great piece of work done by Deloitte where they assessed possible scenarios, and I'm sorry to mention Deloitte here, Grant Thornton, but there was an interesting piece of work they did where they basically looked at different scenarios on how the recovery or how the pandemic might evolve and the impact on the economy. The first was a V, which basically says there will be a steep drop in value, but then there will be a steep recovery, and that will happen fairly quickly. That is the very bullish view, very optimistic view. The other one was a U, which means that there will be a dip because of the extended pandemic. It will take some time to recover, but once it does, it will be very steep. Then there was a W, which basically spoke to what you were saying, a second wave. So there's a lockdown, and then that's taken away, then another lockdown, and that's taken away. And the impact of a W is a drop, recovery, quite volatile in terms of the business. And the last one was an L, and the L was the worst case view that basically says once the economy drops, it's going to take a very long time. It's going to be a very long-term effect, and any recovery will be after an extended period of time. So there has been some work around different scenarios, and the reality is here, the reason why scenarios are so important is because the unknowns are so significant. We don't know if there will be a second wave or how big the second wave might be if it does come. We don't know if the stimulus will have the desired effect that we hope that it does. So these are material unknowns, and just emphasizes the need for the scenario plan. So what I would encourage is using some of the maybe the insights I've just shared now. Consider what those scenarios might do to your business, and a business recovery plan looks to recover the most critical parts of your business as quickly as possible. So you then think about what parts of your business are highest exposed, and some of those parts might be the ones that are your highest earners or the ones that have the highest sensitivity to your ability to deliver. In the context of those critical dependencies in your business and in the context of these multiple scenarios, you then have to apply and say, if we had a U or a W or an L or an extended period of a lockdown, how would I get my core processes to recover as quickly as possible? And you do that using the business insight you have. You know the levers in your business, you know your market, and you begin to build plans. The importance of those plans is so that if any of these scenarios were to happen at some degree, you at least have an actionable plan, and you're not caught out completely. I do encourage very strongly that the building of those scenario plans around the most critical aspects of your business is done at that variability of scenarios. I don't know if I answered both questions. Kenneth, maybe you can. I hope I did.
Yeah, you do touch on both questions quite well. Ms. Keto, do you have anything to add on that particular subject, given that you're waiting on business continuity?
Yes, I don't think I have much to add. I think I just, it's extremely important that you identify the most critical systems, the most critical to your business, as Sam has indicated, and ensure that you build the right scenarios around those critical systems, such that you have the necessary plans should anything happen. And I think I like the three scenarios that Sam talked about, the U, the W, and L, because it gives a wide range. It gives you a wide range of planning tools that you can work with.
Thank you very much. I have a question here for you, Keto. You may choose to or not to answer it, but was coming from one of the listeners in today, and they're asking about the National Task Force. You did mention the National Task Force. So the question is Is it all also going to be audited by yourself and your office?
Most definitely. So we are already planning for it. And we will go in and look at every money they have raised and how they've spent it and how they've recorded it and how it's gone into the government systems. The good thing is that the Accountants General and Ministry of Finance laid out procedures at the heat of COVID. We were so happy about that, on how, and gave them guidelines on how to do the accounting for it, such that we can later go and audit it and actually show people, the public, how the money that was collected was used. So yes.
Okay. And how often, I guess then the public is wondering, how often will this be audited and how soon? Because the people are quite keen to know where the money is going. Because right now they're seeing a lot of money being collected, but they're not seeing the expenditure side.
I think we'd better also talk about scenario analysis because usually our audit comes at the very end. But indeed, as we have done, this COVID task force is saying you need to meet the needs of the stakeholders. So we are getting lots of special audits that are even coming out. Anytime this week, we are going to give out the special audit on the MP's 10 billion shillings. So we are churning out audits very fast given the needs of the stakeholders. So we are aware of that.
All right, thank you. Very well handled. Ladies and gentlemen, as we come to the end of this session here today, this panel, I believe it was quite fruitful and insightful for myself as well. I would like to give each of you an opportunity to just give your 2 or 3 takeaways on the topic of retooling company budgets. What are those 3 things? And I will start with you, Sam, again. And what are those 3 things that every company needs to know and needs to take away from this session here today?
Thanks, Ken. I think quite quickly, I think there's one thing I'll start with is that the disruption has told us that business models are easily disrupted. So we must be able to quickly pivot to new opportunities. And some of the revenue lines that we had in the past, I see entities like the New Vision and entities like that depended on local print. You can see that has been so disrupted that if you don't look for new opportunity and not be stuck on the plan, but have a sight of the purpose and have that guide the planning and the structure, then you will be caught out and likely to be extinct in a short time. That's just the reality of not being able to look at the opportunities. The second thing is stop the bleeding. When revenues are under pressure, the costs that, I like the word of the frills, the things that do not meaningfully add to revenue generation, value creation, critically assess those and take the hard decision about how you reorganize your operating models so that you are more efficient and able to be more sustainable. The last one is digital. It's very clear that entities that are leveraging digital effectively, and even at simple levels, I know market vendors who are now leveraging off safe border to transport products to customers and using apps to deliver. You'd be amazed what's happening out there. Once you create a digital connecting point to your client, you can engage with them multiple times, many times. You can tap into their ecosystems, and we must begin to leverage the power of digital in creating new value streams for businesses. Those will be my last words. Thank you very much. It's been great sharing, and thank you for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sam. I'll come back to you in this question. What are those key takeaways for you that the audience can hang on to and go and implement tomorrow?
Okay. Thank you, Kenneth. It has been a great opportunity for me as well to hear from Sam and Kito in relation to their experiences and the great inputs they had, and I completely agree with them on the takeaways that Sam mentioned. Also, in addition to that, according to me, two or three of the key takeaways would be to develop a business continuity plan for an organization, which has a backup and plan B for the failure of any function, operation, or asset, or the process of the company, basically. And then to develop a cash flow to understand how the issues are going to be, and to do a scenario modeling around the cash flow, and then of course to just manage the costs during this critical time, because like Sam had rightly said that there could be a ULW, but it surely looks a bit unlikely considering the current scenario to have a V with what we are looking around at globally. So it becomes very critical for companies to consider the conservative approach in terms of their costs. Of course, like Sam rightly said, going digital is one of the great options, and there are a lot of cost overheads that we discussed about reduction in terms of whether it is working from home, travel costs, negotiating with rent landlords, negotiating with financiers, and then take the benefit of all the tax relief that government is in process of announcing and has already announced. So those things could really help companies in terms of rebuilding themselves at earliest possible.
Thank you very much, Hemal. BCP has come out strongly: cash forecasting, scenario modeling, digital. Ms. Keto, anything to add on?
Yes, I think they've said it all, but I will add on. I'll add on my three on top of them.
Yes.
One, make a COVID strategic response team. Have one, who will be looking at the situation and understanding the temperatures and getting the information to help in decision making, and ensuring that there is sufficient knowledge of the organization, within the organization and outside the organization too. Please take advantage of government incentives. Government is stressed, but it has given out things out there. Why not grab it? Go for loan restructuring. Go ahead and ensure that they pay your domestic arrears if you have any. Go on and take advantage of the tax deferrals and all those deferrals. And lastly, information management. I find this very critical in relation to whatever we are doing in COVID. If you do not manage your information properly, your organization, its image, and it has a big bearing on business continuity, because whatever the public thinks about you, what is the reaction going to be? How is it going to affect you? I think information management is so key in managing this pandemic. That's what I have to add to those two great speakers before me.
Thank you very much. And ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. Some really strong and important takeaways for everyone who joined us today.